What would you do if you found yourself face to face with a fierce lioness in the wild, risking everything to help her give birth? Most people would run in the opposite direction, but one man chose to stay, and what happened next might just shock you. It's not your average animal rescue story. This is a tale of bravery, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. When the odds were stacked against them, one man's decision to intervene led to a miracle that would change everything. Stick around to find out how a life-or-death moment turned into an extraordinary story of survival, hope, and trust. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. Deep in the untamed heart of South Africa, where golden grasslands stretch into infinity and silence speaks louder than thunder, a lion named Koda stood still. His amber eyes scanned the barren terrain, not in search of prey, but of purpose. Once king of a thriving territory, now he was a shadow of glory past, walking side by side with Leia, his loyal lioness, through lands that had betrayed them. The changing climate had done what no rival predator could. It pushed them to the edge of survival. Drought had swallowed watering holes, and the herds they once hunted had vanished like ghosts in the dust. This wasn't just a story of hunger. It was the beginning of an animal survival story that would test courage, loyalty, and love. Leia, once radiant with vitality, now walked with weariness stitched into every step. Her ribs pressed gently against her tawny coat, and her sharp gaze held more questions than answers. Still, she stayed close to Koda, her breath steady despite the fatigue. In her heart, she carried a secret, a faint flutter of life. In these barren lands, where stray animals were left to fend for themselves or perish, she carried a spark of something miraculous. What kept her going wasn't just instinct, it was hope. These weren't just animals. We're talking pet heroes in their own right, survivors navigating a dying world. Every sunrise brought new risks. Rival predators, collapsing terrain, or worse, humans who hunted not for need but for sport. Yet still, they pressed on, drawn by whispers of safety in the north. Rumors among the scavengers spoke of Mikado National Park, a sanctuary where life still thrived. Koda wasn't certain it existed, but when you've lost everything, even a rumor can become a lighthouse. This wasn't a noble migration. It was desperation wrapped in fur. And in the world of animal rescue stories, desperation often gives birth to something heroic. They trekked for days, crossing thorn-stabbed valleys and heat-baked savannas. Vultures circled above, hoping the king and queen would fall. But they didn't. Not today. Together, Koda and Leia moved like one breath, one body, leaning into the wind, pushing beyond their limits. Their bond was more than love. It was survival. It was sacred. It was what kept them alive. That, and a force we sometimes forget animals possess, the will to protect what's not yet born. And if you followed emotional pet stories or tales of rescue animals long enough, you know, when a creature fights not for itself, but for another, something divine takes over. By the time they reached the gates of Mikado, the sun had dipped low, painting the horizon in blood and fire. They didn't roar in victory. They collapsed in quiet exhaustion beneath an ancient marula tree. The park rangers hadn't seen wild lions in weeks. But when they spotted Koda's massive frame limping beside Leia's trembling body, they knew this was no ordinary encounter. These weren't just animals passing through. They were heroic pets, living proof of resilience. And from that moment on, nothing in the reserve would be the same again. Ranger Sifo had the kind of eyes that could read the land like scripture. After nearly 2 decades walking the dusty trails of Mikado, he could tell the story of a footprint before the sun had time to warm it. That morning, something stopped him in his tracks. Large lion prints, uneven, and deeper on the right paw. "This one's limping," he muttered. A few steps later, he noticed smaller, more delicate prints beside them, fresh, cautious. Namsa, his patrol partner and lifelong guardian of rescue animals, crouched beside him and nodded. "They're not just passing through," she said. "They're looking for something, or maybe protecting something." The 2 rangers began a quiet operation, monitoring the lions without spooking them. From a distance, through thick brush and binoculars, they watched Coda and Leia settle beneath an old acacia tree. Something about the lioness's movements wasn't right. She shifted often, winced subtly, and rarely stood up unless she absolutely had to. Namsa tilted her head, observing with that quiet intuition that only comes from years of animal rescue stories. "She's not just tired," she whispered. "She's pregnant." And suddenly, this wasn't just a patrol anymore. It was the beginning of something sacred, an unfolding pet survival story in real time. Namsa and Sifo fell in a rhythm, setting up a discreet monitoring schedule. No interference, just careful observation. They noted how Coda stayed alert, circling Leia frequently, growling low at night when hyenas came too close. This wasn't just territory, it was protection. Leia, meanwhile, became increasingly restless. She pawed at the ground like she was preparing a nest. Every small behavior told a bigger truth, and the Rangers listened closely. In their hearts, they knew they were witnessing more than nature. They were watching the roots of a miracle. It's these moments, tucked deep in the wild, that become emotional pet stories no one ever forgets. Still, there was tension in the air. These weren't house cats. They were apex predators. Any wrong move could lead to disaster. Sifo remembered the old tales about lions turning on poachers, farmers, even rangers. But what he saw in Coda's eyes wasn't rage, it was worry. And in Leia's quiet breaths, he recognized pain. "If we step in, we risk it all," Namsa said. "If we don't, we might lose her." It's the kind of dilemma only those deep in animal rescue truly understand. Out here, the line between guardian and intruder is thinner than a reed in the wind. Every hour that passed felt like a test. The lions didn't run, but they didn't fully trust either. And somewhere between every paw print and pause, Sifo felt it building. The weight of responsibility, the unspoken connection between humans and animals in crisis. And this fragile, sacred tension was only the beginning. The days stretched into weeks, and the Rangers' quiet observation became a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Sifo and Namsa kept their distance, but they were always near, their eyes never straying far from Coda and Leia. The more they watched, the clearer it became. Leia was indeed pregnant, her belly growing round, her movements slower, more deliberate. Every time she shifted under the acacia tree, a new worry planted itself in their hearts. If she wasn't ready, or if the birth didn't go as nature intended, the consequences could be catastrophic. It wasn't just the survival of the cubs at risk, it was the survival of this family, this bond between man and beast. The Rangers, seasoned in the ways of the wild but not blind to the extraordinary, knew that intervention might soon be necessary. So, they began preparing. Namsa gathered medical supplies, antiseptics, pain relievers, tranquilizers, just in case, and everything that could ensure Leia's safety if the time came. But even as they prepared for the worst, there was an unspoken hope between them. If they didn't need to use those supplies, if nature could take its course, it would be a victory for the lions, for Mikado, for the ecosystem itself. The thought of rescue animals thriving on their own was the purest form of success they could hope for. Weeks turned into months, and Leia's condition was closely monitored. Every morning, Sifo would scan the horizon, while Namsa would check the data from the previous day: temperature, behavior, movement. The lions had grown more accustomed to the Rangers' presence, but still, any sign of threat made them tense. As they ventured deeper into their routine, Sifo started to notice the subtle signs of impending birth. Leia's restless behavior becoming more pronounced, her grooming becoming more frequent, and Coda's behavior shifting from protective to slightly anxious. It was clear, the time was near. Every day felt like a countdown. Sifo knew they couldn't afford a misstep, and Namsa felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The lions weren't just animals in a park. They were a part of a living, breathing ecosystem that humans had the power to either protect or destroy. This was more than the typical pet adoption story. This was about saving a life, a lineage. Each decision they made could alter the course of not just one, but an entire species. Namsa sat silently one evening, watching Leia from a distance. The lioness looked back at her, eyes full of trust. And in that moment, Namsa made a promise to herself. No matter what happened next, they would do everything in their power to help. Not just for Leia, but for the hope she carried within her. For the future. For Mosi, the day arrived quietly, almost deceptively so. It was the kind of morning that made the Rangers feel like time had slowed down, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The sun had just begun to warm the sky, and there, under the shadow of the acacia, Leia lay on her side, her body tensing sporadically in the early stages of labor. It was happening. Namsa and Sifo, who had been waiting for this moment for months, immediately knew the danger of the situation. There was no turning back now. Leia's labored breaths grew more pronounced as the minutes passed. She was struggling, her body racked with pain, each contraction a silent cry for help. Sifo, who had always prided himself on understanding the animals he cared for, felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't just a lioness giving birth. This was a mother fighting for her life and the life of her unborn cub. And yet, no matter how much they wanted to help, they knew the risks. Sedation could easily cause more harm than good. If Leia went into shock, there was no guarantee that either she or her cub would survive. They had no choice. It was time to intervene. The decision was as terrifying as it was necessary. Namsa and Sifo exchanged a brief, knowing glance. They didn't speak the word aloud, but they both knew that this wasn't just about saving Leia's life. It was about saving the future of this lion family. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. With one last check on their emergency supplies, the Rangers cautiously approached. Koda was close, his eyes narrowed, his body tense with barely contained aggression. He watched them, growling low, but he didn't make a move. Something in his instinct told him that these humans weren't there to harm, but to help. Namsa moved first, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She gently approached Leia's side, speaking softly, her voice a quiet anchor in the storm of the lioness's pain. Sifo stood just behind, ready to act if anything went wrong. Slowly, cautiously, Namsa positioned herself to offer support. She carefully administered a small dose of pain relief medication to help Leia through the worst of the contractions. But this was just the beginning. The hardest part was yet to come. With a deep breath, Namsa readied herself to help the lioness through the birth process, knowing full well that every move she made was a risk. Not just to Leia and her cub, but to herself as well. Leia's body tensed again, a final push that seemed to last forever. In that agonizing moment, the Rangers understood just how thin the line was between life and death. And just as quickly as it had begun, Leia gave a final, desperate cry, and then silence. The labor had taken its toll on her, but they weren't out of danger yet. The real challenge was just beginning. As the minutes dragged on, the tension in the air thickened. Koda, the male lion, stood guard just a few yards away, his golden eyes burning with a mixture of distrust and protectiveness. The Rangers knew that his patience was wearing thin. Every movement they made was being scrutinized, every step calculated. The air crackled with an unspoken promise. If they did anything wrong, they would feel his wrath. Namsa could sense it too. Koda's low growls vibrated through the earth beneath them, a stark reminder of the raw power of these magnificent creatures. And yet, despite his intimidating presence, he did not attack. There was something different about this moment. He was conflicted, torn between his duty as a protector and his growing trust in the humans who had been watching from the shadows for months. Namsa, ever the calm presence in these high-stakes situations, kept her focus on Leia. The lioness was struggling, her body pushing against the pain, her breath shallow and labored. Namsa knew this was the moment where things could go one of two ways. If she moved too quickly or made a misstep, they could lose everything. Yet, if she hesitated too long, Leia's life and the life of her cub could be lost. With steady hands, Namsa reached for the small vial of medication she had prepared, her voice soothing as she spoke softly to the lioness. "Just a little longer, Leia. Stay with me." Her words were like a gentle breeze, a soft promise that no matter how hard it got, they wouldn't leave her side. Leia's eyes flickered as she heard Namsa's voice. The lioness, though in great pain, seemed to calm under the ranger's presence. Slowly, Namsa administered the medication, careful to be as gentle as possible. She could feel Koda's gaze on her back, and for a moment, she almost expected him to lunge at her. But instead, he did nothing. His eyes remained locked onto the rangers, and in those eyes, there was a flicker of something unexpected, understanding. He knew that these humans weren't here to harm, but to help. It was a silent agreement that passed between the lion and the rangers, an understanding forged in the heart of the wild, one born from months of careful observation and trust building. The medication worked slowly, but it was enough to ease Leia's pain, just enough to help her through the most difficult stage of labor. Namsa's heart raced as she kept a watchful eye on the lioness, knowing that the next few moments would be critical. Koda remained by his mate's side, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the rangers. Every time they made a move, he growled, but he held back. Namsa couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Here, in this quiet, dangerous stretch of the wilderness, they were not just witnesses to a birth. They were participants in a life-or-death battle that stretched beyond the limits of the human-animal divide. The silence in the air was deafening. With each passing minute, the tension between the rangers and the lions seemed to dissolve, replaced by a deep, unspoken respect. Koda's growls became less frequent, and as Namsa continued to work, she couldn't help but wonder, had they truly become part of the pride? Or was this just a moment of grace in the untamed wild? Whatever it was, she knew one thing for certain. Their intervention had not only saved Leia, but it had also brought them one step closer to understanding the power of compassion that transcends species. The tension that had gripped the air for hours finally began to lift. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a soft, golden glow over the scene. After what felt like an eternity, Leia gave one final, powerful push, and the moment they had all been waiting for arrived. A small, squirming cub emerged into the world, its tiny body covered in the remnants of its journey. Leia let out a relieved, exhausted breath, her eyes wide with love as she nuzzled the cub to her chest. The rangers stood in awe, their hearts racing with both relief and wonder. It was a miracle in the truest sense of the word. Against all odds, the lioness had given birth, and the tiny cub was alive. But it wasn't just the birth that moved the rangers. It was the way Koda, the powerful male lion, responded. Instead of roaring in triumph or turning away, as many would have expected, Koda leaned in close. His large, rough tongue reached down, tenderly licking the newborn cub. There was no sign of aggression, no fear, just a simple, beautiful act of affection. It was a moment of pure, raw tenderness, a side of the wild that few ever get to witness. Namsa, who had seen countless births in her time as a ranger, could hardly contain her emotions. This wasn't just the birth of a cub. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a continuation of a family's legacy. Namsa carefully approached the cub, moving with the caution she had learned from years of working with animals. She gently placed her hand on the tiny creature, feeling its warmth and the rhythmic beat of its heart. She checked it over thoroughly, making sure it was healthy and strong. Despite the harsh conditions it had been born into, the cub was thriving. Its eyes were closed, but it instinctively reached for Leia's warmth, snuggling against its mother's fur. Namsa couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of pride and awe at what they had just witnessed. It was moments like these rare glimpses into the miracle of life, that made all the dangers of the wild seem worthwhile. Koda watched closely as Namsa checked the cub, his body still tense but no longer threatening. There was a mutual understanding between the lion and the rangers now. The once guarded male had shifted, his trust growing stronger with every passing moment. Namsa could feel it. This was no longer just a job. This was a partnership, one built on mutual respect and compassion for the animals they were entrusted to protect. The lions, once distant and wary, were slowly beginning to accept them as part of their world. For a brief moment, the Rangers allowed themselves to bask in the beauty of what had just happened. They had saved a life. They had witnessed a miracle. And as they stepped back to give the family space, they knew that this was just the beginning of something much greater. The cub, named Mosi, was now a symbol of hope. Hope not just for the lions, but for all the animal rescue stories that showed how compassion and dedication could change the course of nature itself. The naming of the cub was a moment of profound significance. Namsa and Saifo, having witnessed the powerful birth and the bond that had formed between the lions and themselves, felt a deep connection to this small, fragile life. As the cub's tiny form nestled against Leia, they realized that this little creature represented so much more than just the continuation of a lion's bloodline. Mosi, meaning new beginning, was a symbol of hope, of survival against all odds. He was the living embodiment of the miracle they had just witnessed. A new chapter in the wild had begun, and it was their privilege to have played a part in it. Koda, the lion who had once been wary and protective, now stood proudly beside his mate and newborn cub. The Rangers could see the change in him, a quiet strength that radiated from within. He was no longer just a predator in the wild. He was a father, a protector of his family. The name Koda, meaning bravery, seemed fitting, for the male lion had shown incredible courage in the face of fear. Namsa and Saifo felt a deep respect for him. He had allowed them into his world, and that was something no one could take for granted. As they stepped back, the Rangers allowed the family space to bond. They knew that this moment was sacred, and there was no need to interfere any longer. They had done their part. The labor had been difficult, the risks had been high, but in the end, they had helped bring a new life into the world. Mosi, the cub, had taken his first breaths in the world of the wild, a world that was both beautiful and unforgiving. But for now, the Rangers chose to retreat. They knew that their presence was no longer needed, at least not in this moment. The family had begun its journey, and the Rangers would watch from afar, offering support only when necessary. The retreat was not a retreat of defeat, but one of quiet pride. Namsa and Saifo knew that they had been part of something extraordinary. Their hearts were full, and the weight of the situation had not escaped them. They were leaving behind a legacy of compassion, of trust, and of hope. The bond they had formed with Koda, Leia, and Mosi was not one that would soon be forgotten. They had not only saved lives, but had helped to rewrite the story of these lions, a story that would continue to unfold in the wild for years to come. As they made their way back to their base, Namsa couldn't help but glance over her shoulder, her heart swelling with emotion. The wild was a place of danger, but it was also a place of miracles. And today they had witnessed one of the greatest. Mosi's first breath, Koda's tenderness, Leia's strength. These were the moments that would stay with them forever. And as the sun set on that peaceful day, the Rangers knew that their work had only just begun. As the days turned into weeks, Mosi began to grow, his tiny, fragile body quickly transforming into the lithe, strong frame of a young lion. Under the careful care of his parents, Koda and Leia, Mosi thrived. He watched his mother's every move, learning from her grace and her strength. From Koda, he learned the ways of the wild, the subtle shifts in the air that could warn of danger, the quiet patience that came with being a predator. Every day, the cub became more independent, more confident in his place in the world. The wild was no longer just a place of survival. It was his home, and he was learning to navigate it with the wisdom of generations before him. The Rangers, though keeping a respectful distance, continued to monitor the family. They had not interfered in the lions' lives since the birth, but they had not abandoned them either. There was a quiet understanding between the humans and the lions now, one that didn't require words. Saifo and Namsa would observe from afar, using their knowledge of animal behavior to ensure the pride was safe. Koda and Leia, once so distrustful, were now more relaxed in their presence. The Rangers could see the change, a slow but sure acknowledgement that they were no longer just outsiders, but part of the ecosystem, part of the rhythm of the land. Namsa would often find herself watching Mosi as he practiced his first steps of hunting. Though he was still too young to truly hunt, he mimicked his father's movements, stalking the tall grass with the same fluidity Kota showed when on the prowl. It was mesmerizing to watch, a dance between predator and prey, nature's age-old ritual in action. Mosi, though small and still clumsy, was showing promise. The strength that flowed through his veins was undeniable, and with time, he would become a force to be reckoned with. For now, he was a student of the wild, learning from his parents how to survive in a world that could be both unforgiving and beautiful. As the Pride continued its journey through the reserve, the Rangers watched with quiet pride. The bond they had forged with Kota and Leia was something that many never experienced in their careers. The trust between the lions and humans had grown, and the Rangers knew that the time was coming when they would need to step back entirely. Mosi was growing into the lion he was meant to be, and Kota and Leia were there to guide him every step of the way. The Pride was no longer just surviving, it was thriving, and the Rangers had played a part in that. But as the family grew stronger, so did the challenges they faced. The wild was never predictable, and the Rangers knew that their work wasn't over. The lions had proven themselves resilient, but the world they lived in was full of dangers that no one could anticipate. Saifo and Namsa would continue to watch, continue to learn from these magnificent creatures, but they also knew that the real work, ensuring the lion's survival in the wild, was about to take on a whole new level of urgency. As the seasons passed, the story of Kota, Leia, and their cub, Mosi, began to ripple through the reserve. What had started as a quiet, intimate moment between the Rangers and the lions grew into a source of inspiration for others. The reserve's staff, veterinarians, park guides, and even local visitors watched with admiration as the family continued to thrive. They had witnessed firsthand the power of compassion and the miraculous ways that nature responded to kindness. It was as though the wild had given them a second chance, a rare opportunity to witness the raw beauty of life's resilience. Mosi, once a helpless newborn, was now growing into a young lion full of curiosity and energy. His lessons in survival had only just begun, but already he had begun to show signs of his strength. Each day, he practiced stalking through the tall grasses with his father by his side, learning how to approach prey, to move silently and purposefully. The Rangers observed from a distance, noting how Kota would occasionally let Mosi make the final move, allowing the young lion to experience the rush of a successful hunt. Mosi was becoming the predator he was always meant to be, and with each successful attempt, his confidence grew. It was a beautiful, almost poetic transformation. The cub that had once been so fragile, now learning to survive in the wild. But the most stunning change came when Mosi let out his first full roar. It was a sound unlike any other, a deep, echoing call that reverberated through the trees and across the plains. The Rangers stood in awe, their hearts swelling with pride. They had witnessed the birth of a lion, and now they were witnessing the emergence of his strength. The roar wasn't just a symbol of Mosi's growth. It was a reminder of the bond between humans and animals and the delicate balance that kept the wild alive. Mosi's roar was a promise that the future of these lions and the harmony between them and the humans who cared for them was in safe hands. Over time, the lion family became a living testament to the possibility of harmony between humans and wildlife. The Rangers, who had once seen themselves as protectors, now saw themselves as part of something much larger, something interconnected. Kota, Leia, and Mosi had taught them that trust, respect, and compassion could transcend the barriers of species. It was a humbling lesson, and as Mosi continued to grow, the Rangers knew that their role was to ensure that this balance remained, to help guide the lions through the challenges they would face in the wild. And so, the story of Kota, Leia, and Mosi became a legend within the reserve, a story of survival, love, and the transformative power of trust. It inspired the next generation of conservationists who would one day protect not just these lions, but all the animals who called the wild home. It was a reminder to all that when humans and animals come together with mutual respect, miracles can happen. The family had not only survived, they had thrived, becoming the symbol of hope and resilience that the world needed. The night had settled quietly over the savannah, a vast expanse of stars stretching out like an endless tapestry across the sky. Beneath this celestial canopy, the lion family rested. Leia, ever the protective mother, lay beneath a towering acacia tree with Mosi nestled in her arms. The cub, now growing stronger each day, was content in his mother's warmth, his chest rising and falling in the rhythmic pattern of peaceful sleep. Leia's golden fur shimmered in the starlight, a soft, gentle glow that seemed to capture the very essence of the wild's beauty. Coda, ever vigilant, stood guard nearby. His massive frame was silhouetted against the starry sky, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The father lion's duty was never done, even in the quiet of the night. He was the protector, the unwavering pillar of strength for his family. As he stood there, alert and watchful, he occasionally glanced back at Leia and Mosi. There was a softness in his gaze, a deep affection that contrasted with his fierce, untamed nature. He had watched his cub grow, and now he watched over him with a sense of pride and quiet satisfaction. Namsa and Sifo, standing at a distance, watched the scene unfold. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the family, and for a moment, they felt as though they were witnessing something sacred. The connection between humans and these magnificent creatures had come full circle. What had once been a fragile trust had blossomed into something unspoken but undeniable. The lions had come to trust the rangers, and in turn, the rangers had learned to trust the wild. It was a partnership forged in compassion and respect, one that would live on in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. In that stillness, there was a quiet acknowledgement. Coda, Leia, and Mosi did not need words to communicate their gratitude. The lions glanced back at the rangers, their golden eyes catching the light of the stars, a silent thank you passing between them. It was a simple but profound gesture, a reminder that the wild was not just a place of survival, but a place of connection, of bonds formed across species. The rangers had helped them when they needed it most, and in return, the lions had given them something far greater, a lesson in resilience, in the power of trust, and in the unspoken understanding that existed between them. As the night deepened, the lions remained undisturbed, their family united under the blanket of the savannah sky. And so, the story of Coda, Leia, and Mosi reached its natural conclusion. But in truth, it was just the beginning. The wild would continue to unfold in ways unknown, and the rangers would continue to protect the lions and all the creatures of the reserve. The lesson of the lion family would echo through the reserve for years to come, a reminder that even in the harshest of environments, there's always room for hope, for change, and for the extraordinary bonds that tie us all together. What can we learn from this incredible story? It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of bravery are born from unexpected moments. This man didn't just save a life. He became a part of something much bigger than himself, a living symbol of the unspoken bond between humans and wildlife. We often underestimate the power of compassion, but in the wild, it can be the difference between life and death. So, what would you risk for the chance to make a difference? Would you have stepped in, knowing the dangers? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, if you want to see more extraordinary rescue stories and learn about the amazing connections between animals and humans, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.